I'm here, and I'm very excited, very flattered to be included here. I mentioned to my wife that I was speaking at a conference in Tampa, and she said, "Do they know you don't speak Spanish?" And I said, I got invited by Tom Scherberger and Bill Carlson. I think we'll be okay without a translator. So appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I know that I'm supposed to be 5 to 8 minutes. So the question that I think I threw out as a topic is, we're all aging, is Tampa ready? And the answer is no. Thank you for coming to my talk. I would love to talk about, I need to tell you a story. I'm going to skip over a mystery about AARP and Tampa Bay. I might come back to that later. I'm going to also talk about a couple of lessons that we've learned over the years that I think are really important. And then I'm going to finish with a couple of suggestions. So I'm just going to do the story and the suggestions, and the rest I suspect will come out during Q&A. So the story, mid-1940s in Los Angeles, California, there was a woman who was a retired school principal. So she was the first woman to be a principal in Los Angeles, in the state of California actually, had a doctorate degree. Her name was Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, and she had to retire early to take care of her mom. And unlike most of these stories, her mom got better, and so she was bored. She was somebody who couldn't sit still, and so she volunteered in her community. She volunteered for the Retired Teachers Association, and her job was on the welfare committee. The welfare committee went and checked on people who were retired teachers just to see how they were doing. So one day she went to a house, she had a list with names of retired teachers and their addresses, went to a house to check on somebody, knocked on the door, and they said, "Yeah, there's nobody here by that name." So she said, "No, but like you're on the list. It says the retired teacher so-and-so lives here." It's like, "No, nobody here by that name. Could be the woman who lives out back." And so she went around behind, and there was an old chicken coop that this woman lived in. 1940s, retired teacher, didn't pay any Social Security, there was no Medicare, healthcare costs were so high that all she could afford was this little hut, this former chicken coop. And that enraged Dr. Andrus so much that she said, "We've got to do something about that." The local organization could only do so much, just a group of retired teachers. So what she did was band together all of the state retired teachers in the country to form the National Retired Teachers Association, which advocated for better health benefits, better housing, better financial security, which advocated in the marketplace to provide health insurance. Again, before Medicare, nobody wanted to insure people who were older. And also tied people together for community service. So the advocacy in the marketplace, advocacy in legislature, and then service to the community was the founding of the National Retired Teachers Association. After about 10 years, she had so many people who wanted to join who had nothing to do with education that she formed a secondary group called the American Association of Retired Persons. And that's how we got here today. So why do I tell you that story? As a community, we are aging. And as a community, those things that were the dynamics that were in Dr. Andrus's, our founding story, essentially, are still the ones at play today. We are still very much focused on how we help people take care of their aging parents, just as Dr. Andrus did. We're still very focused on financial security and health security, rising cost of healthcare and prescription drugs. And we're really, what we recognize is that in order to live well, you need to be able to live in a community that's supportive of that. So AARP works with the World Health Organization, one of the things that we do, to implement the age-friendly network of states and communities. There are hundreds of them across the country. In Florida, there are 45. I'm happy to say that Mayor Castor signed Tampa in as the 45th member of the age-friendly network in Florida. There are actually several states that have joined. Governor DeSantis made Florida the 4th state to join the age-friendly network. Age-friendly network is not like LEED certification, where you have to meet certain thresholds in order to be certified. This is more like the first step in a 12-step program where you realize you have a problem and you want to work on it. And so this is an opportunity for states, for localities to learn from each other. What are you doing in order to make this a better place for people of all ages to thrive? There are 8 different domains, but since I only have 5 to 8 minutes, you're not going to get all those. I'm going to give you 2 suggestions that I think for the city of Tampa, and frankly for most of Florida, might be the most important. The first, to play off of the former, the young person in the back, Nathan, it is around housing. And we know that in the Florida legislature there's a lot of discussion about housing. We know locally there's a lot of housing. Ironically, that chicken coop story is a story of an accessory dwelling unit gone wrong. We have an opportunity to do this right, and I think there are historic neighborhoods in Tampa and across the state that have had accessory dwelling units, granny flats, bungalettes, I like as a name, that's a great one, garage apartments, that provide additional opportunities for housing, for workforce for sure, but also for those who are aging or for those who need to bring in a professional caregiver or a family member as a caregiver to have a place to live. And I think that the way we tackle housing is critically important because, as we all know, rents are going up significantly. We are seeing a lot of displacement of those who have lived in low and middle income housing, and not just the ways that we think of in downtown Tampa. We hear a lot from those who are in mobile home parks who are being driven out of mobile home parks as well by rising rents. So I think that the way we approach housing is really important. We can do that in a way that helps sustain people and keeps people together and active in their community. The other thing that I want to point out that is a little harder to get at, and that this group is actually a great example that bucks the trend, and that's around civic engagement. The woman in the back of the house only got found because there was an organization that had a welfare committee that looked out for them. Florida is bad at that sort of civic engagement, at that sort of civic culture. I first heard about this from a couple of guys in Tallahassee who are working in an organization called the Florida Civic Advance, and they said, look, Jeff, we think you should know that Florida is the worst at almost every measure. We're better than some at voting because our elections are a little more interesting, especially the local ones. But when it comes to philanthropy, when it comes to volunteering, when it comes to attending public meetings, when it comes to knowing your neighbor, Florida is near the bottom because most people come here from somewhere else. And we could talk a little bit about what those dynamics mean for us. But here's what I noticed. When there are disasters, it's the people who know their neighbors and are known by their neighbors who do best. Almost regardless of all the other factors. It was true in Katrina, it was true in Sandy, it was true in Ian, it was true during the pandemic. We need people to look out for each other, which means we need to look out for other people. That's a culture change that is a lot harder to change than putting in accessory dwelling units or making transportation options more available or all of those physical things. And that is, as much as the housing challenge, a grave one that the city of Tampa and all of the state of Florida needs to address. I'm going to stop there because I could talk for another 30 minutes, but I was told I had 5 to 8. So what do you have?